Okay, welcome everybody. So we will start the first lecture. And the first lecture, as you have seen the schedule in the website, is what we call the classical black hole. And I'll be taking your first lecture. So let me first introduce myself. As I told you also in the introduction session, I am Sudipto Sarkar. My main research interest is black hole physics and also quantum field theory in curved spacetime. So before we start the lectures, I should tell you that let me just briefly introduce to you what I want to do in this lecture. So there will be 5 lectures. First of all, a basic background will be assumed. What I mean is that I will assume that you are familiarized with the basic of general relativity. Okay. Also in the introduction session, I am Sudipto Sir. One second. My main research interest is black hole physics and also quantum field theory in curved spacetime. Okay. And what I'm going to talk about is mostly starting from the Schwarzschild solution. Okay. So I'll discuss in the first lecture a little bit about the causal structure of the Schwarzschild solution. Then also I'll talk about the maximum analytic continuation, construction of what we call the Kruskal diagram, which will tell you the existence of a causal horizon, the event horizon. In the subsequent lecture, I will talk about how material particle moves in this Schwarzschild spacetime in time like geodesic, and then I will talk about null geodesics, particularly the notion of photon sphere and how that photon sphere will be seen from in the sky, the shadow of a spherically symmetric Schwarzschild black hole. Then in the next 2 lectures, last 2 lectures rather, I will discuss what is called a curved black hole, a rotating black hole. I will discuss the notion of ergosphere, event horizon for curved black hole, and then talk about a little bit briefly what happens to the photon sphere as well as to the shadow of a rotating black hole. And if time permits, we will also discuss how from the shadow we can extract new physics and how do I distinguish between shadow of a ultra compact object without horizon like boson star, Grava star, etc., and a honest to God black hole. Okay, and that would be the end of the lecture. So that's all with this introduction. Let me start the first lecture. Okay, and we will start with what we call the Einstein's equations. Okay, so I hope all of you can see my iPad. I request you not to open the microphone in between. I will stop in every 20 minutes or half an hour, and then you can ask me any question you want. Okay, so let's go ahead. Okay, good. So we'll start with the basic notion of general relativity. Okay, most of you knows what general relativity tells us. It tells us in the presence of matter and energy. So let me write in the presence of matter or energy, because I am doing a relativistic theory. I am trying to develop a relativistic theory of gravity. So I must treat matter and energy in equal terms. Okay. And then it says the space-time is no longer flat. Flat. Okay. Space-time is no longer flat, and the space-time is rather a pseudo-Riemannian manifold. Riemannian manifold, and it equips the metric G mu nu. Okay. Again, I request everybody to keep their microphone in mute position. Okay? Otherwise, it will be very difficult. Okay. What does pseudo-Riemannian manifold means? It means our signature, the signature will have at least one negative sign and the rest of the positive sign. The signature which I am going to use is minus, plus, plus, plus. It's a 4-dimensional pseudo-Riemannian manifold with signature minus, plus, plus, plus. Okay. And the assumption is that there exists a metric G mu nu on this manifold, and this connections and everything are metric compatible, or those usual assumptions, there is no torsion and everything. Oh, good. Then the fundamental object of importance is our Riemann curvature tensor. Curvature tensor. It's a 4-index object. Okay, it has its usual symmetries, which we know. Although it has large number of components, but the number of independent components 4 dimensions is only 20. These are extremely important. And curvature signifies the existence of a non-trivial gravitational field. Okay, so basically, if curvature is 0, this would imply a necessary and sufficient condition. Necessary and sufficient condition. Sufficient condition for space-time to be flat. So even if I can write a metric in a very cumbersome coordinates, which looks completely different from the curved flat space-time, if the curvature is 0, it means there always exists a coordinate transformation by which I can make that cumbersome space-time into a flat space-time in Cartesian coordinate. So it means you give me any space-time, however complicated it may look like, I can always coordinate transform if curvature is 0, coordinate transformation to make it eta mu nu. And what is eta mu nu? Eta mu nu is basically diagonal -1, +1, +1, +1. Okay. The flat Minkowski metric. Not only that, this is also true in the other way. If there exists such a coordinate transformation, the curvature will be 0. So curvature will be 0 is a necessary and sufficient condition for space-time to be flat. These are the basic general relativity, which we all know. From the curvature tensor, you can take trace and you can define a new tensor, what is called a Ricci tensor. Ricci tensor. And Ricci tensor's definition is very easy. This is R alpha beta G gamma delta or alpha gamma beta delta. Note that I have taken a contraction on second and fourth. This is a convention. You can sometimes people take contraction on second and the third. They differ by my convention by a minus sign. Okay. So one is to be a little careful in understanding what definition of Ricci tensor I am using. It's only a matter of definition. Okay. Using Ricci tensor, I can also construct what is called a Ricci scalar. And that is R, which is nothing but the trace of Ricci tensor. You can satisfy yourself that Ricci tensor is a symmetric tensor. Basically, R alpha beta equal to R beta alpha. Good. Now, all these are mathematicians' names, Ricci, Riemann, which means they were known to mathematicians even before physicists started this business. Okay, this business of curved geometry was known to great mathematicians, Gauss, Riemann, and many other people. Okay, but physicists started this game. They enter into this game with Albert Einstein, and therefore now I will define a tensor, which of course the name will suggest that it is defined by a physicist, and this is what is called an Einstein tensor. Einstein tensor. And that Einstein tensor is defined, all of you already know, I'm sure. Okay. And what is the characteristics of this Einstein's equation? Einstein's tensor, again, this is a symmetric tensor. Sorry, my mistake. Also, the covariant derivative of the covariant divergence of the Einstein tensor is 0. So therefore, and this is nothing but the consequence of the Bianchi identity. Okay, good. So the Einstein tensor is a tensor which will play a very important role. We also know that the special relativity already gave us the energy momentum tensor. Energy momentum tensor. See, in special relativity, neither the energy nor the momentum plays a special role. I can always choose a frame of reference, a transformation where things can be mixed. So therefore, what is important is a combined object, a covariant object. And that covariant object is the energy momentum tensor T mu nu. Different components of the energy momentum tensor represent different physical attributes. T00 represent the energy density. The diagonal component represent the pressure, and off-diagonal component represent the stress in the system. Okay. So, and also the 0I component or the I0 component represent the momentum flow in the system. Okay. Good. So it's a package thing which everything is taken together, because in relativity you can always do coordinate transformation by which you can mix these things. So therefore it's better to have a covariant object. So therefore what Einstein's equation is the relationship between T mu nu and the curvature. Okay. Of course, T mu nu is also covariant divergenceless, and therefore the Einstein's equation is read as G mu nu equal to 8 pi G T mu nu. Note that I have not including a particular term, the cosmological constant term. For our lecture, our discussion, we will always assume that the cosmological constant is 0. But most of the discussion can also be generalized by adding a cosmological constant term. It is not going to be much of a difference. Okay. Oh, good. So this is what the famous Einstein's equation, and if we write it more detail, sorry. So I have already set C equal to 1, but I want to keep the Newton's constant G at the equation. Okay, good. And you know that these equations are 10 equations because R mu nu has 10 independent components, and therefore these are in 4 dimension 10 coupled non-linear partial differential equation. Okay. So what is the philosophy? The philosophy is that I give you T mu nu. When I say I give you T mu nu, it means I give you matter. For example, I give you sun. For classical relativists, sun is nothing but a spherically symmetric T mu nu. Okay, energy momentum tensor. So then your aim will be take this T mu nu, solve Einstein's equation, and give me G mu nu. So matter, which is signified by T mu nu, solve Einstein's equation, get geometry. That's the whole idea. But of course, it is easy to say, but very, very difficult thing to done, because Einstein's equations are extremely complicated equation, even for hardcore mathematicians. And therefore, it is almost impossible, at least impossible to most of us, that to obtain the general properties of the solution of the general solutions of the Einstein's equation. We do not know how to handle Einstein's equation, the general properties of the solutions of Einstein's equation. For example, there is something called global existence problem for differential equation. It's very difficult to solve those problems for Einstein's equations, just because they are nonlinear partial differential equation, coupled partial differential equation, and they are not easy to handle. Okay. But we will be able to solve this equation in very, very simple cases. And of course, nowadays, people use very powerful numerics called numerical relativity to obtain various interesting solutions of the Einstein's equation from the seed data. Okay, good. Now, the philosophy says is that once you solve the Einstein's equation, you get the metric. So you get the metric spacetime. Okay. So given the metric, in this spacetime, matter travel on geodesy. Okay. So now the idea is that once you obtain the metric, given this metric. Now I'll be a little bit careful. I will say test matter travel on geodesy. So when I say test matter is exactly same as the notion of the test charge. Okay. Just like we have, let's say, in Maxwell's electrodynamics, I have a charge distribution which creates its own electric and magnetic field. In that charge distribution, we will study how a test charge moves. Okay. Exactly here, what we will do is that we will first solve the Einstein's equation for a matter like sun. We get the spacetime. In that spacetime, we will study test particle, how they move. And what are these test particles? Let's say a good example will be a test particle like Earth. Okay. Of course, Earth has its own mass. Okay. It also influences the space-time. But the mass of the Earth is significantly smaller compared to the mass of the Sun. So therefore, even if we are making an error, these errors will be very, very small. And for the time being, it is perfectly okay to, consider Earth as a test particle. Okay. So given this metric, test matter travel in geodesy. So 2 sub points, if it is light, photon, they travel in null geodesic, and if it is, you know, anything else, I mean, matter, particle, physical particle, let's call it massive particle. That means something whose rest mass is not zero, and that travel is time-length geodesic. So that is the basic physics. How light moves in this space-time, null geodesic. How massive particle like Earth moves in the time-like geodesic. Note that in this picture of general relativity, there is absolutely no force called gravity. I have a curved space-time. Geodesics are basically quote unquote straight lines in this space-time. Okay. So the poor particle and the light actually moving in the straight line of this space-time. Okay. Good. And what is a geodesic? Of course, we all know what is a geodesic a little bit. There are different ways of defining geodesics. You can define geodesic in terms of using the concept of autoparallel curves. Okay, using the parallel transport, the tangent vector is parallelly transported on the curve, and that gives you the Keimlach geodesic equation. And the corresponding thing for the null geodesic equation, one has to be a little careful because of the choice of the parameter on the null geodesic. But those matters, I leave it to you to discuss. Okay? Those are basic matters in general relativity. Good. So what we will now do is that we will consider a very, very simple situation, okay, which is solve Einstein's equation. Einstein's equation for vacuum. Okay. And this is exactly what we do generally in the Maxwell's electrodynamics. Okay. So for example, we have this Poisson equation. Okay. And then what we say is that we'll solve Poisson equation in the region where there is no charge. Okay. Outside the charge distribution. And it becomes equal to the Laplace's equation. Okay. Poisson equation becomes same as the Laplace's equation. Good. Excellent. Great. So, and then, so note that the idea is this, that here is the sun, let's say. I am trying to solve Einstein's equation here, vacuum. So the condition is that T mu equal to 0. So how do I know where is the sun? That concept will come in terms of the, what is called the boundary conditions, okay, in the space-time, okay, good. So then Einstein's equation reduces to the following equation, R mu nu minus half R G mu nu equal to 0. Simply because T mu nu equal to 0. Okay. We can trace of this equation and immediately we'll find that R minus half R, if I take trace of G mu nu in 4 dimension, I'll get 4 equal to 0, and this will give me R equal to 0. Okay. Once I have R equal to 0, I can substitute back in the Einstein's equation, and therefore I will get R mu nu equal to 0. Okay. So this is what we call the vacuum Einstein's equation. Okay. The aim is to solve this vacuum Einstein's equation. Again, turns out that it is not easy. Okay. If you don't tell me further simplifying assumption, it is not even easy to solve this equation. Okay. Now we'll make further assumption. Okay. One assumption we'll make is that space-time is stationary. Space-time is stationary. What do we mean by this statement? We simply mean by this statement that nothing in space-time is dependent on time. Okay. One has to be a little careful because in GR, these statements are coordinate dependent statement. What do you mean by time coordinate? Okay. How do you know if it is dependent in one coordinate, it is independent in time in the other coordinate transformations? Okay. So what you need in GR is physical statement has to be coordinate invariant statement. Okay. So the stationarity is a notion of time independence. But in GR, we have to be careful and we cannot make a coordinate dependent statement. So we'll make a statement something like there is a timeline Killing vector. Okay. So we make a statement that the spacetime has at least one time-like Killing vector. Okay, good. Okay. Excellent. And therefore, the idea is that I have a time-like Killing vector xi a in the spacetime, and therefore, if I choose an adaptable coordinate system, everything will be independent of this time. Okay, good. Second, I'll make another simplifying assumption. Not only I will assume that the space-time is time independent, I will also assume that there is a further symmetry and the space-time is static. And that is t to minus t, there is a symmetry. Actually, what it turns out in spherical symmetry, many of these assumptions need not be invoked extra. They actually turns out to be consequence of the theory, like something called Briscoff's theorem, but I'm not going to say things. We'll simplify things. We'll assume for the beginning that we are interested in statics, stationary, static spacetime. Okay, so not only time independent, but also we want spacetime to have T2 minus T symmetry. Okay, good. And third, we will assume that it is of spherical symmetry. Now, this is a usual trick in theoretical physicists. Whenever we cannot solve anything, we will assume the things to be spherically symmetric. And there's one can make a joke that physicists only can talk about spherical chickens. Okay, well, that joke is a joke, but this is an extremely powerful and useful technique. Okay, it turns out if we can solve for spherical symmetry, first of all, for many cases, this assumption is a very good assumption. For example, you can go and check for sun how spherical it is. Okay, of course, it's not a perfect sphere. Okay, but what happens is that gravitational force it is being under equilibrium under gravitational force for a long time. Although there is a rotation in sun is actually rotating on its axis. Up to a very good approximation, you can think of it as a spherical. Okay, so I encourage you look at in Google what is the difference between polar diameter of sun to the equatorial diameter. Okay, and sun is how large, I don't know. I mean, he's huge. Okay, and that difference will be actually tens of kilometers. Okay, so you can understand that how good approximation sun can be considered as a spherical object. Second of all, if we know the spherically symmetric solution, we can later understand on the basis of this solution how to add, say, for example, make it axisymmetric. Okay, so we'll go step by step. Okay, that will be interesting thing to go. Good. So we will assume, what does it mean when I say that the matrix is spherically symmetric? In mathematical term, it means there are other three Killing vectors. There are three more Killing vectors. Killing vectors. And these are space-like Killing vectors. And they form the algebra of SO3. Okay. So in some sense that I can write down these vectors to be xi a, where a is the spacetime index and I is the index which vector I am using. So I goes from 1, 2, 3. Okay. Every vector x1, x2, x3 are the three Killing vectors which form the SO3 algebra, and I is the spacetime index on them. For the time being, you may ignore the index I. And then this vectors forms an algebra similar to the algebra you have seen, angular momentum algebra in quantum mechanics, but we will not add the I here. Okay, so by convention we'll say IJK. Okay. So this is the SO3 algebra which these vectors must obey. So that means we are looking for a spacetime with four Killing vectors, one time-like Killing vector signifying the time independence, and three space-like Killing vector which will obey the SO3 algebra. Okay, so this is the spacetime which we will look for, and you can immediately write down this equation. So what we'll first use is that we'll use coordinates which will make this symmetry explicit. So we use usual spherically symmetric coordinate. or rather spherical coordinates. It's a 4-dimensional spacetime, t r theta phi. Obviously, the meaning of this coordinate should be same as what we will use in the spherical coordinate system in flat spacetime. Okay, and therefore, in this coordinate system, the most general form of this metric should be ds square. First of all, because there is a SO3 symmetry, I cannot make components to be a function of, except in some sine square theta part of the 2 metric, I cannot make it a component to be a function of theta and phi. Okay, so therefore those, and it also, therefore it should be also function of the r magnitude of r because of the spherical symmetry. So all directions are isotropic. Okay, so therefore I will make it like a of r dt square. Note that this minus sign is the choice of my signature, plus b of r dr square, plus I'll make it a more simplifying assumption. It is r square d omega square. Okay. Okay. And what is this d omega? D omega square is a usual metric on sphere S2, d theta square plus sine square theta d phi square. Okay. So note that how the symmetry is explicit in this coordinate. Why this coordinate is a good choice of coordinate. Okay. Simply because if you consider t equal to constant, and r equal to constant. So if I put t equal to constant and r equal to constant, what do I have? Look at that, t equal to constant, this term will go away. R equal to constant, this term will go away, dr equal to 0. So I am left with dr square, ds square equal to r square d theta square plus sine square theta d phi square. That is clear. This is the metric on S2 of radius r. Okay. So my space-time geometry is this. I'm using the coordinate system that I have this time coordinate. I have this spatial coordinate, spatial slice. Of course, it's a 4-dimensional space slice. So the spatial slices at t equal to constant slices are 3-dimensional geometry. Okay. They're volumes. Okay. So take a slice. Okay. Let's say this one. Okay. Okay. My drawing is a bit, difficult. Okay. So this is t equal to constant slice. Okay. So this constant slice is a volume. Think of your room which you are in. Okay. That room has 3 directions. Okay. X, Y, Z, R, theta, phi. This room is also evolving in time. Okay. So think of this room, close your eyes, think of that is evolving in time. Okay. Freeze the time. Okay. So think of this room at a one particular time. This is your slices at constant time. Okay. Now if you put now r equal to constant, what you're left with is this figure on this picture. But this is actually a geometric sphere. Geometric sphere. S2. Okay. So t equal to constant, r equal to constant slices are geometric sphere. Okay. So basically you filled your room with concentric sphere. Okay. And this is your time slice. And then you're moving on this time slice in time direction. That constitutes your geometry. Okay. Good. Now what you do is that you take this metric minus a of r dt square plus b of r dr square plus r square d omega square. Substitute it into Einstein's equation r mu nu equal to 0. And then it turns out you do a lot of manipulation and it turns out remarkably the Einstein's equation reduces to a first order differential equation. That is actually remarkable. Okay. So therefore you actually have only one constant of integration. Okay. And the solution, basically the metric, is then given by, of course, I am not going to solve this. Okay. This is going to, it's a standard solution in any of the textbook. You can look at any of the reference material. We'll talk about it. Okay. And the answer is 1 minus 2gm. Let me put the g and c explicitly. Okay. C square r dt square dr square 1 minus 2gm c square r plus r square d omega square. Okay. And the m is a constant of integration. Constant of integration. One quick way to interpret m is to go to the Newtonian limit and find what is the Newtonian gravitational potential. Okay. And from that, identify m as the Newtonian mass. Okay. But of course, relativity, we should be able to interpret m without even going to the Newtonian limit. We can do that. It turns out this is related to the value of the Hamiltonian of the general relativity. But this Hamiltonian is a little bit subtle. It is only given by the boundary term, okay, because of the underlying symmetries of the theory. There is no bulk Hamiltonian, but it is something called the ADM, okay. Andrew Desert Mr. Hamiltonian, but I'm not going to go into those interpretation. So for us, the Newtonian mass is enough. We will consider this m to be the mass of the spacetime. Okay, good. So then what is our main picture? And then I will stop for few minutes for the question. So the main picture is that I have a spherically symmetric matter distribution. Okay, outside I have T mu equal to 0. I have spherical symmetry, spherically symmetric, as well as static. Actually, it turns out that you don't need the static condition extra, but it's okay. Let's keep it, okay? And then the space-time looks like, so let me draw it with some simple notation. Where f of r is 1 minus 2gm by c square. Okay. And therefore, this is what is called the Schwarzschild geometry. Schwarzschild geometry, first obtained by Karl Schwarzschild, was a very famous German astronomer, physicist. And the story goes that he was in the First World War front in 1915, fighting the war in the trenches. And while in the front, he actually solved Einstein's equations and obtained this geometry. Okay, I mean, this is one of those very interesting romantic stories about relativity theory and physics as a broad subject, that one can go to a front in terms of in the Great War, but still solve the laws of universe, okay, and obtain one of the most important solution of general relativity. This is called the Schwarzschild geometry. So I'll stop here and I'll have some questions, okay. So let me look at the chat if there is any question. Then I'll ask you to ask me some question. Okay. Okay. So one question is that please briefly describe geodesic. So geodesic, I'm not going to discuss. I will discuss a little bit in the next classes, and you will see that some basic concept will be covered. But of course, I request you to look at the reference books which have been mentioned in the website, and they will have all the details of the geodesic construction. Then there is a question: we are considering Earth to be a test particle. Does that mean we are approximating Earth to be massless? No, we are not assuming Earth to be a massless. We are just simply assuming that mass of the Earth is much small compared to the mass of the Sun. That's all. Okay. So, for example, what we are assuming is that if mass of the Earth is m, mass of the Sun is this. Okay, so Sun is this, Earth is this. This is much less than 1. So therefore, even if you are making error, this error will be proportional to this ratio, and this ratio will be extremely small. Okay. So therefore, you can ignore all those errors. Consider Earth to be a test particle. Of course, you are right that if Earth is moving very fast, you have to be careful in considering Earth to be a test particle. So not only you are assuming Earth to be a small mass, we are also assuming the velocities related with Earth is much small compared to the relativistic velocities. Okay, which is actually true. If you actually look at all the velocities of Earth compared to the Sun, compared to our galactic frame, they are in the order of 100 kilometers per second. Okay, which is much smaller than the velocity of light. So therefore, with all numbers filled in, we can always assume safely that planets are test object around the sun. Okay. About reference book, please look at the website, which have all the reference book, and most of those reference books are lecture notes are available online, and books, I mean, I leave it to you to get the books. Okay. Okay. Then there's a question of staticity. Look, staticity is an extra assumption. Okay. What we are doing is that we are assuming that the space-time does not have any difference between t to goes to minus t. What is the consequence of this assumption? Suppose there is a dr dt term, okay, or dt term. Okay. Note that the only way dt enters in this solution through dt square. But can there be a dr dt term? No, it cannot be, because if there is a dr dt term, it will distinguish between t goes to plus minus t. Okay. So therefore, what you are assuming is that the space-time does not have any dr dt term, and therefore there's a symmetry in t to minus t. That is what is called the staticity. Staticity is more stronger assumption. Okay. Stationary does not mean static, but static, of course, always means stationary. Is it clear? Good. Turns out there is something called, Birchkoff's theorem, which ensure if you are talking about, at least in general relativity, if you are talking about spherically symmetric solutions, outside the vacuum is always static. Okay. So you don't actually have to assume it. Okay. Good. Then there's a question. So you are assuming discussion for flat space. I actually explained it, that why we need to take the Newtonian limit for m, because we want to interpret this constant capital M. If you take the Newtonian limit, you could identify the m to be the constant of the constant of integration as the Newtonian mass. But you don't have to do it. Okay. You don't have to do it. Good. You can actually, within the relativity theory, there is something called ADM formalism, which tells you how to understand m as the energy of the entire spacetime. But that issues are little subtle. I am not going to discuss it here. What is time lag Killing vector? I request you to look at any basic GR book. Okay. SO3, in terms of algebra, there is no difference between SO3 and SO2. They are different groups, but their algebras are same. Okay. So anyway. So I'm only talking about in terms of algebra of generators. Can you explain why you are not using cosmological concept? Oh, no, that is simply because it is not relevant. It is not going to be useful. Okay. Anyway, for most of the observational studies like related to black hole shadow, the effect of cosmological constant will be extremely small. So just for simplifying, we are using our coordinate system. Good. What patch of the manifold does our coordinate? It's a very good question. You're absolutely right. This coordinate system may not cover all the part of the manifold. This is a very important, thanks for asking this question. You have to understand, whenever we talk about coordinates, we are saying that locally we can construct coordinate. So there may be a part of patch where it is covered by the coordinates, this particular r theta phi coordinates. And we will see also, okay, we'll see that there are other parts of the full space-time through the maximum analytic continuation, which requires different coordinate patch to cover. Okay. Good. It takes spherical symmetry theta phi. Green function solution. Of course, you can do you can use green functions, but remember the green functions requires linear equations. Okay, Einstein's equations are not linear. So the green function will not work for poor Einstein's equation. But if you linearize Einstein's equation, particularly when you talk about gravitational waves, when you linearize Einstein's equation, you can always define a green function corresponding to the box operator for the linearized Einstein theory. Okay, good. And those green functions are also have similar to advance and retarded part. And then you can do the usual things which you can do in electrodynamics. Good. So I'll stop here for the questions. I have stopped here. So I'll resume the discussion. Again, I will come back to the questions, let's say after another 20 minutes. Okay, good. So if we look at this matrix, okay, first of all, it is very satisfying that we have a first space-time solution. Note that very interestingly, if you put capital M equal to 0, the solution reduces to flat space-time in Acha, there is one question which I want to understand. Pseudo-Riemannian. Pseudo-Riemannian means there is a minus and plus signature. Generally, mathematicians use PQ. P is the number of positives, Q is the number of negatives, something like that. What we have is a minus plus 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 signature. Why we have pseudo-Riemannian manifold? Okay, this is simply because we want to have a non-trivial null vector. In a Euclidean manifold, when all the signature is plus 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 or minus 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 minus, the null vector is a zero vector. Okay, but if we have minus plus 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 or plus minus 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 signature, pseudo-Riemannian manifold, I can have null vector to have non-zero component, still is norm to be zero. And why we need null vector? Because we want to determine the propagation of light. Light propagates along null geodesics, okay, or null directions. To define a non-trivial null directions, we create pseudo-Riemannian manifold. Okay, this is why minus plus 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 signature, or some people use plus plus minus signature is used. Okay, is it clear? Oh, good. So pseudo-Riemannian means which is not Riemannian, some mathematical terms. Okay, good. So if we look at this matrix, let's start with the second part of the lecture today. Okay. By the way, I will share a nicely written lecture. Okay, nice is a relative term. Better written lecture notes with all of you at the end of the everyday's lecture. I don't know whether we will be able to upload it regularly, but let's see whether we can upload it regularly in the website. Okay, good. So note that f of r, this metric function is 1 minus 2gm by c square r. Now we'll make the usual simplifying assumption. We'll set g equal to c equal to 1. Okay, the natural units. Okay, and then the metric will become 1 minus 2m by r drt square plus dr square 1 minus 2m by r plus r square d omega. Good. Now it is obvious there is something interesting happening at r equal to 2m. Okay, so you can see that g00, which is minus 1 minus 2m by r. Okay, you can clearly see it is 0 at r equal to 2m. So generally r equal to 2m, sometimes also denoted by rs, is called the Schwarzschild radius. Okay, so old term. Okay, but same thing. Okay, good. You can see that this is positive as long as, sorry, it is rather negative. Let me use the negative pulse if r is greater than rs, and it is positive if r is less than rs. Okay. So when I explain to you there is a pseudo-Riemannian manifold is signature minus in front of the time coordinate dt square. But you'll see if I start with a minus sign outside r greater than rs, once I inside the r greater than rs, the signature changes to plus. Okay. Now this is a bit worrisome. Okay. So what it simply means, we will see that this choice of coordinates is not going to be a good choice of coordinate. Okay. Not only that, we also find another assumption, another observation that GRR, which is 1 by 1 minus 2m by r, this guy diverges as r goes to rs or r goes to 0. In fact, G00 also diverges when r goes to 0 or r goes to 12. Okay. Now, at first glance, it seems to be really bad thing. Why would the metric component diverge? Okay, at some point in space-time. Okay, that's very strange. Okay. First of all, let me give you a mathematical reason that you don't have to be really worried about it. Okay, let's consider S2. Metric on S2, unit sphere. Okay, so the metric is ds square equal to dt square plus sine square theta d phi square. Okay. Now, if you consider g theta theta, or say g phi phi, okay, g phi phi is given by 1 by sine square theta. And you can clearly see this also diverges as theta goes to 0. That is at north pole. So the up g phi phi diverges at the north pole. Of course, that doesn't mean something strange is happening at the north pole. I mean, we have been to north pole. We doesn't mean me and you. People have been to north pole, and I can ensure you nothing much is going on, except it's a very habitable, it's horrible place in terms of weather. Otherwise, nothing is diverging going on in the North Pole. Okay, good. So it means that this is just an artifact of your coordinate choice. And we already know in sphere also, we need to choose two patches to cover the North Pole as well as the South Pole. Okay. Once we choose two patches, every point on the sphere can be covered by using a nice coordinates. Okay. So this is a problem with the choice of coordinates, or mathematicians call the charts. So we don't have to worry about it. What you should do is that you should choose a clever choice of coordinates, a different choice in which these problematic points of the first coordinate are nicely covered. Okay. And then these points are called coordinate singularity. A coordinate singularity is simply apparently looking singularities. They are coming because we are not good enough to what is called find the coordinates properly. Okay, that's all. Of course, the r equal to 0 also things diverges. G00 diverges. GRR also gives you to go to 0 rather. Okay. So r equal to 0 is also a problematic point. Okay. So either r equal to 0 or r equal to rs, both these points are problematic. But one of them could be just because we are using a wrong choice of coordinates. And the one good probe to find which one is the coordinate singularity is to calculate a scalar. Okay. Because the value of a scalar is independent of the choice of coordinates. Okay. So if you can obtain the value of a scalar, if you show that this is finite in one coordinate system, then it will be finite in all coordinate system. Okay. So therefore, if the scalar is finite, we will be able to obtain, it is guaranteed that we will be able to obtain a good coordinate system and find a nice covering chart for the problematic points in another coordinate system. So what scalar we'll consider in Schwarzschild geometry? It turns out simple scalars are all vanishing in Schwarzschild geometry. R is 0. Since R mu nu is 0, R mu nu, that scalar is also 0. So we are left with the first non-trivial simple scalar, something called Crispin scalar, and that is given by R ABCD, R ABCD. Of course, the curvature is not 0, it's a flat space time. So you can calculate this, and the answer will be 48 G square M square C to the power 4 R to the power 6. Just check the dimensions. Okay, it should have the correct dimension. Okay, good. So, and you can clearly see this is perfectly regular at R equal to RS. So regular at R equal to RS. So therefore, that conclusion is then R equal to RS is nothing but a coordinate singularity. Whereas the R equal to 0, you have to be a little careful. Okay, it turns out that R equal to 0 is a real singularity. Okay, and then that led to a lot of interesting physics. Okay, which we are not going to discuss at this stage. So remember that R equal to 2m is a coordinate singularity. So what we want to do is to find good set of coordinates, good coordinate system to cover R equal to 2m. So this region R equal to 2m, which is actually a three-dimensional region, we want to cover this region by using a good choice of coordinate. Okay, good. Now, how do we choose a coordinate? Okay. So one thing you can clearly see is that one way to choose, first of all, let me also explain to you that for most of the cases, this R equal to 2m surface is not part of the physical consideration. So let's do some simple case. Let's go to sun. Okay, here is our sun. Okay, what is the diameter of our sun? I have no idea. I mean, it's some thousands and thousands of kilometers. Okay. So let's say diameter of sun is capital R. Good. Now let's calculate this Schwarzschild radius. So outside the metric is Schwarzschild. Good. So let's calculate what is the Schwarzschild radius for sun. Schwarzschild radius for sun is 2gm by c square. Okay, 2m, but I have introduced the g and c to obtain a value. And if you do it, it will be around few, okay, I don't know the exact number, but if you put it, it will be around 10 kilometers. Okay. What it means? It means it is well within the sun. So it is somewhere here, okay. 10 kilometers. Of course, I'm not drawing in scale. Sun is like thousands and thousands of kilometers. So the Schwarzschild radius is in between, inside the sun. But the Schwarzschild solution is obtained by assuming vacuum. But inside the sun, T mu nu is not equal to 0. So therefore, Schwarzschild solution itself is not valid inside the sun. Okay. So for sun, this whole problem of R equal to 2m doesn't even arise. Okay. Because once we go inside the sun, I have to solve a different Einstein's equation, which is Einstein's equation with matter. The pressure of sun, the density of sun, everything will contribute. Okay. And it will be completely different solution for which there is no such thing like Schwarzschild coordinate singularity will come. Okay. So for sun, we don't have to worry about R equal to 2m. So you can clearly see R equal to 2m will be an interesting case, physically interesting case when you are talking about very compact object. So if you take sun, compressed it below the 10 kilometers, I don't know how you are going to do it. Okay. If you can do it, then that will be the interesting subject. So then R equal to 2m will be outside the object. And that is what we call a black hole. So you clearly see, to get a black hole, what you require is that a huge collapse of a massive object into a very compact region. Okay. And that is non-trivial. The only way we know that happens, at least in our present universe, there may be another way in the early universes, is the collapse of massive stars. Okay. We believe that collapse of massive star at the end of their nuclear fuel, when they're exhausted, they collapsed onto themselves and implode. And then what will lead to existence of a black hole. Okay. For which the Schwarzschild surface is outside the object. Okay. Then what happened is a matter, different matter. Let's go ahead with our calculation. So what we want is a good coordinate system. Okay. What we want is a good coordinate system. Okay. What we want is a good coordinate system and which can cover the R equal to 2m surface. One way to construct this coordinate system would be to use light rays. Look, if R equal to 2m surface is a good surface, okay, then light rays will be able to cross it. Okay. So it makes sense to use the light rays, the coordinates on the light rays, to construct a good coordinate system. Okay. So therefore, what we'll first do is that study or understand how light travel in this way. Or rather, how the light cone behaves. Okay. So in flat spacetime, we all know how the light cone behaves. There is this time-like event and the space-like event. There's a past light cone. There's a future light cone. That's all. We all know this, understand. And note that in flat spacetime, the structure of light cone is invariant, is absolute quantity. Okay. Every point you can construct the future light cone and you can construct the past light cone. Okay. And the metric is same at each point. In Cartesian coordinate is -1, +1, +1, +1. So one could say in a little rhetoric way that in Newtonian physics, space is absolute and time is absolute. In special relativity, neither space nor time is absolute. Rather, space-time is absolute. It's everywhere Minkowski. Okay. So the one way to understand the flat space-time is that close your eyes, think of the space is covered, the space-time is covered with light cones. And all the light cones are same. Okay. There can be obtained from one with another, just translating. Okay. But once the light cone rotate, jump, and everything, we are in the region of what is called the region of what is called the Kurzweil. Okay, good. So let's see how the light cone will behave. We are only interested in radial light cone. Okay. And what is a radial light cone? Radial light cone is, of course, for light cone ds square equal to 0. And for radial, I have d theta equal to d phi equal to 0. So things are only falling radial. Okay. And for radial light cone, the equation of the light cone immediately is from ds square equal to 0. We will have, note that the metric is this, right? Minus 1 minus 2m by r dt square plus dr square 1 minus 2m by r plus r square d omega square. Since this is radial, we do not consider about the d omega square part, that is 0 automatically. And therefore, we are left with dt dr equal to plus minus 1 minus 2m by r whole inverse. Okay. Of course, if I choose the plus sign, it means dt dr is positive, okay, at least outside the r equal to 0. So this is the notion what we call outgoing. What it means is that as time increases, for this light rays moves in the direction of increasing r, say come out, outgoing. And if it is a negative sign, dt dr is negative, and that gives us a notion of ingoing light rays. At each point, time symmetry required that I have outgoing light rays, and I can also think of ingoing light rays. Okay, good. So these notations to be important. Okay, good. Once we have it, now let's understand what does this equation tells me. So dt dr equal to plus minus 1. Okay, this is in Schwarzschild coordinate. Okay, you clearly see this slope for the light cone. So this is the slope. This equation is obtained ds square equal to 0. ds square equal to 0 gave me this equation. And therefore, if I draw in TR curve, dt dr is nothing but the slope of the light cones. Okay. So you clearly see this goes to plus minus infinity as r goes to 2m. Okay. So let me draw this picture. So this is r, and this is the surface, let's say r equal to 2m. I am plotting t this direction, r this direction. Let's say this is some reference line. Okay. So I'm moving in this direction, increasing r. If I have a large distance from this hole, from this object, the space-time is almost flat, and I have the usual light cone. Okay. Once I move closer, it is clear that light cone is flipping. Note that the dt dr is a function of r. Convince yourself that light cone will squeeze up. So this will be the light cone when I'm nearer. In fact, if I move closer and closer, dt dr more shoots up, and therefore it squeezes more and more. Okay. So what is happening is that if I move closer and closer to the object from infinity, the light cone close up, squeeze. Okay. As one moves towards r equal to rs. Okay. So it means in terms of light cone, there is something interesting going on at r equal to 2m. Okay. So what we need is a good coordinate system which will open up the light cone. Okay. Note that one has to be very, very careful. All these effects you are seeing is the effect of coordinates. Okay. In GR, the physics is independent of coordinate. So what we have to do is that, is there a coordinate system in which the light cones looks good? Okay. If they are good, that is fine. Okay. Therefore, we will introduce a coordinate system which will open up the light cones. Okay. And this coordinate system is called the tortoise coordinate. It's an interesting name given by John Wheeler. And look at the properties of this coordinate, and maybe you can think of why it is called a coordinate. It's like making things slow, tortoise coordinate. Okay. So what we'll do is that we will write the Schwarzschild metric in a little bit different form. Okay. What is the form we'll write? We'll write it as ds square equal to 1 minus 2m by r minus dt square plus dr square by 1 minus 2m by r whole square plus r square d omega square. This is exactly the same metric which we have written down. Now what we'll do is that this object, we will define a new coordinate. We call it dr star square. And this is like what is called a tortoise coordinate. Okay. So we define dr star equal to dr into 1 minus 2m by r. Note that this is a good coordinate system as long as only r greater than 2m. Okay. We cannot really use this coordinate system at r equal to 2m. Okay. So we are, away from this. Okay. And you can integrate this equation. If you integrate this equation up to a arbitrary constant, this r star will be r plus 2m log and then r by 2m minus 1. This also shows that you are outside the r greater than 2m. But so this is an important equation which you are going to use. Again, I will share with you lecture notes. Okay. Good. Excellent. Now what we will do is that, so my metric is now given by ds square equal to 1 minus 2m by r minus dt square plus dr star square plus r square d omega square. Very good. Okay. Now I want to study with this coordinate system. So earlier I have t r theta phi. Now I want to go to, so t, sorry, my mistake, r star theta phi. So therefore this r, I'm thinking of this as now as a function of r star. Okay. Please understand that. I want to now study null geodesics in these coordinates. Of course, the idea is very simple. If I want to study light cone, again, sorry, my mistake, light cone, I set ds square equal to 0. Okay. Of course, I'm only looking at radial light cone, and therefore the equation will be again t equal to plus minus r star plus c constant, where c is a constant. Okay. Good. Because it is clear that if I set this equal to 0, I will get back. Remember, we are at r greater than 2m. This is strictly not valid at r equal to 2m. Okay. So we'll get back dt. So this will give me dt square equal to dr star square. And then I'll have this. This c has nothing to do with the speed of light. This is just a constant. Okay. So we have two set of equations for the light cone. First of all, we have t minus r star equal to constant. If I choose the positive sign, and by our earlier convention, this is nothing but the outgoing light cone. Outgoing light cone. And then we have t plus r star equal to 0. If we choose the negative sign here, and sorry, not 0, my mistake again, constant. And by our earlier convention, we call it ingoing light cone. Okay, good. And the slope of the light cone now is very interesting. The slope of the light cone is now, sorry, dt by dr star equal to plus minus 1. So compared with this equation, which we have earlier, this equation, what I did is that I have reabsorbed this 1 minus 2m by a factor into the definition of the tortoise coordinate. So compare this with this equation. This is plus minus 1. Okay. Note that an interesting part of this equation, that as r goes to 2m, R star, convince yourself it goes to negative infinity. Okay. If R goes to infinity, R star goes to positive infinity. So therefore, my range is this. R varies from 2m to infinity. And this R star, this is for R, varies from negative infinity to positive infinity for R star. So that means R star only cover the region outside R greater than 2m. So R star goes to negative infinity when R is 2m, R star goes to positive infinity where R is greater than 2m. Okay. Is it clear? So that it means is that R star coordinate, the so-called tortoise coordinate, only cover the way we have defined so far, only cover the region outside the light cone, outside the Schwarzschild radius. But what is interesting is that the light cone, the slope is a constant, plus minus 1. So as if exactly like what would have happened in the Minkowski space. Okay. So in this coordinate, light cones are rather well behaved. Okay. So that well-behaved light cone will be look like. So this is R star and this is time. So everywhere the light cones are exactly same. There is no problem. So this goes to R star to negative infinity, which means R goes to 12. So far so long, but we have not achieved really anything, because what we actually want is to obtain, obtain a coordinate system which actually cover R equal to 2m. But unfortunately, that R star coordinate, the way we have defined, does not cover R equal to 2m. Okay, it only goes close to the R equal to 2m and then it becomes negative infinity. But what it does is that it gives us a nice way, okay, to write down null coordinates. And this is what we call Eddington Finkelstein coordinates. And they are defined with this pair small u and small v. Okay, we will define them u equal to t minus r star and v equal to t plus r star. Note that the R star, what it gives is outside, they gives a notion how to follow a light cone, ingoing or outgoing. Okay, that is the utility of the R star coordinate. Okay, once they have given, I can completely forget about the R star coordinate. I can go to a coordinate system, T R theta phi to the usual coordinates which you have first wrote down, to V R theta phi. Okay. We can express our space-time using VR theta. Okay. Good. And once you do that, you can show this. I leave it to you for a very simple exercise. You will be able to show that your space-time is now written as 1 minus 2m by r dv square. Note that we are using v as a time. This is little bit subtle. Generally, t is the time. We have now converted into V. V is a parameter. V equal to constant represent outgoing light rays. Okay. V equal to constant represent outgoing light rays. So we are using the parameter on the outgoing light rays as the choice of time in our space-time. So we are parameterizing our space-time using light rays. Okay. You can always do that. Okay. dv square. But interestingly, this is now a non-diagonal metric. The angular part does not change. It remains as it is. Okay. Good. Note that here V equal to T plus R star. Okay. And V equal to constant lines. Constant lines are radial light rays. So let's look at my convention. Okay, so sorry, V equal to constant line are ingoing light rays, radial ingoing light rays, not outgoing. Radial ingoing light rays. So my expectation is that I can sit on this light rays, move with them, Okay. Of course, I have to move at the speed of light then. Let me do that. Okay. And in our mind, I can always do that. Physically, I cannot. So we will cross the R equal to 2m. Okay. Now this metric, this is an important metric. Okay. This is a non-diagonal metric. You should check all the components are here well defined at R equal to 2m. This you have to check a little bit carefully. This is not a diagonal metric. One simply cannot up and down. Okay. There is a diagonal, non-diagonal term. Be a little careful. Calculate all the metric component, both up and down. Convince yourself all the metric components are well defined at R equal to 2m. Okay. So although this metric is initially defined at R equal to 2m, greater than 2m, using the mathematical techniques of using the tortoise coordinate, once I obtain the metric, this metric is well defined everywhere. So therefore, what we can say that forget about that R star coordinate, I will only consider this ingoing light ray, which is perfectly okay, and it crosses the R greater than 2m. Okay. And therefore, this metric I can analytically continue beyond the R equal to 2m also. Okay. Of course, I cannot do it at R equal to 0. That's a real singularity. Okay. So to convince you that using this metric, you can go inside the R equal to 2m, let me now draw the light cone at this metric. Okay. So study the light cone. Light cone. In this particular metric. How does the light cone behaves? Okay. Let's go ahead and do it. So before I go to the light cone, I'll just wait a little bit and see if there is any question. So let me look at the chat if there is any question. Okay. Why you are okay? In this, okay. In this equation, why R tends to 0, present GRR goes to infinity. Yes, I already mentioned to you that R equal to 0 is a bad point also. If R tends to 0, GRR depends on up or down. One of them goes to infinity, other one goes to 0. Also, I explained to you G00 diverges as R tends to infinity, R tends to 0. So, but it turns out the Crispin scalar also diverges because it goes as 1 by R to the power something. Okay. So what it means is that R equal to 0, unlike R equal to 2m, is a real singularity. Okay, what does it actually means is not part of our real part of this course, but basically it remains in some sense the end of the space-time. Okay, good. Okay, you have contracted second and you have contracted. No. The signature choice and the choice of contraction is independent. Okay, these are different conventions. You can choose any signature and either see the curvature tensor is pairwise antisymmetric. Okay, so and there is a symmetry in the choice of two pairs. Okay, so what you do is that you can either contract first or third, which is equivalent to first and fourth up to a minus sign. Okay, so there are two different ways of contracting the curvature tensor and get Ricci out. Okay, so you choose which one ever you want, but you have to be careful that what is the sign convention you are using. What is the coordinate on the individual light cone? I exactly do not understand what this question means. What it simply means is that I can construct V. Okay, what I'll do is that in the next discussion, you will see how to construct the light cone. Okay, so I'll wait for a few seconds if there is any other question. Note that it has 1 minus 2m by r and it integrated up to using the log. Okay, so therefore the range has to be limited r greater than 2m. That's all, because r equal to 2m is the singularity of that equation. That's all. Is there any other question? Yeah, I will talk about it. Light cones, it will be clear when I talk about Roshan. I'll cover this in the next discussion. Good. So let me now go to the next 15 minutes. How does a light cone behaves? Okay. And this will answer most of you. So we are again considering radial light cones. Okay. We are not interested in theta phi direction. Okay. So that means we will come to the radial, non-radial light cones when we will discuss, for example, the black hole shadow. So my metric is now in this coordinate system, VR theta phi. Metric is 1 minus 2m by r dv square plus 2 dv dr plus r square d omega square. Okay, good. Radial light day, the equation is ds square equal to 0, d theta equal to d phi equal to 0. These angles are not changing. These are radial one. Okay, no change in theta phi direction. Okay, if you do that, you can immediately convince yourself the dv dr, the gradient, is there are two values. Either dv dr equal to 0, because it's a what should I say? It's a you can immediately write it down from the metric, setting ds square equal to 0, or dv dr is 2 into 1 minus 2m by r inverse. Okay, these will be the two values of the dv dr. Okay, now if dv dr equal to 0, it simply means v equal to constant. And last time we saw at least r greater than 2m, that this is nothing but radial ingoing light rays. These are the light rays which is going into the black, towards the object. Okay, I should not say black hole here. Okay, I have not even defined. Okay, so therefore it is clear that dv dr equal to 2 into 1 minus 2m by r inverse, therefore must define radial outgoing light rays. Outgoing light rays. Good. So in this coordinate system, I have obtained that v equal to constant line, the radial ingoing light rays, and this dv dr equal to 2 into 1 minus 2m by r whole inverse. This represent outgoing light rays. Okay, so let me now draw the light cone. So how do I draw the light cone? Let me first again pardon my drawing capabilities, which are not very good. Let me, this is r direction, this is v direction. So ds square equal to 0 gives me a curve in vr. Okay, one of these is a v equal to constant curve, which is this. So this is the direction of the ingoing light ray. Okay, so this is direction r to infinity. Okay, so we are coming from infinity going towards the object, and this is r equal to rs, the so-called Schwarzschild radius. Okay, good. So very far away, see, note that in this coordinate, this direction is always ingoing light ray. Okay. An outgoing light ray is in some other direction. Let me draw this like this. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Let me draw this always in black, just to be careful. Okay. And therefore, very large distance from the whole from the object, I have the light cone to be this. Okay. What is interesting is that the ingoing light rays always remain v equal to constant. So this is always the direction of ingoing light ray. But the outgoing light rays, the slope is now a function of time, a function of radius. The slope for outgoing light ray is a function of radius. So if r goes to infinity, this is 2. When r goes from infinity, if you goes to finite values of r, you can clearly see this slope will tilt.